Hello everyone, how are you on this wonderful day? Welcome to today's science lesson, which is how the eye works. You will need a piece of paper for this lesson, and it's labeled at the top, diagram of an eye, and you'll see the side view of an eyeball, and it'll be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's definitions there. So as we go through today's video, or this video right here, and the next one, you're going to be slowly filling in the names of as the paper calls it, eye parts, which I probably would have worded differently, the eye parts. And we're going to take this one little chunk at a time, right? Because there's a lot of them. So we want to make sure that we want to go nice and slowly so you fully understand how the eye works. And it's pretty darn fascinating, if I do say so myself, how the eye works. So again, you'll be filling out the diagram. We will be understanding the functions of the major important parts of the eye. That's the goal. So let's begin, shall we? So we don't see things, we see light bouncing off of things. That is how vision works, okay? And we would not be able to see anything if it wasn't for that little quote unquote hole in our eyeball. It's called the pupil. Okay. Now you notice that I put the word hole in quotation marks. Okay. And in a later slide, I'll say why. Why did I say quote unquote hole in your eye? It's the black circle at the center of your eye. And it doesn't look like a hole, but it is. Well, it kind of does. So this is where light enters. And the fun and funky thing about it is that black hole, that pupil, will change in size. And it changes in size without you doing anything about it. It's an automatic thing, okay? So your pupil could either be very, very large or very, very small, and you're not even aware of it, okay? So it depends on how bright it is in the room that you're in, or if you're outside or inside, how bright. So if you're in a room or outside and it's very dark, okay, your pupil will get larger to let the most light that it possibly can into the back of your eye, right? Because the back of your eye is where the images form. We'll get to that later. But so if it's dark out, again, you don't even realize it's happening, your pupil gets much larger to let a lot of light in to your eye, okay? However, if it's very bright out, or if it's very bright in the room that you're in, just the opposite happens. Or if like a doctor shines a light directly into your eye, your pupil will get really tiny, okay? Really tiny. So it'll shrink depending upon the amount of light. So that's what the pupil does. It's the quote unquote hole in your eye. It lets in the light so that the image can be formed in your eye, and it grows or shrinks depending on the light. And it's number 2 in the diagram. So right now I want you to pause the video, and now I obviously we're not going in order, okay? And next to number 2, opening to the inside of eye, I want you to write the word pupil. It's right there on my screen right there. So it should be easy enough to do. So please do that now. Okay, moving on. How does the pupil change size? How does it get from much larger to get smaller? Well, that's due to the iris, and the iris is the most famous part of the eye. Why do I say it's the most famous part of the eye? Because it's the part of the eyeball that's colored. That's got the color to it. So it's kind of what people notice first about someone else's eye, the color of their eye, okay? Especially if their eye color is nice and bright, not like Mr. Brown's. So what color is your iris? What color are your eyes? Well, for Mr. Brown, it's not surprisingly brown. But my daughter has different colored eyes. Why? Because my wife's eyes are different than mine. And so you inherit your eye color from others, usually from your parents, but sometimes from, genetics are a funny thing, which we'll talk about in greater detail at another time. And certain eye colors are what we call more dominant than others, and they have a better chance of being passed down to children, and some have a less of a chance. But again, we'll go, it's a whole other concept, a whole other conversation. So again, it's called the iris. And it's almost, think of it like a little muscle. That muscle expands and shrinks your pupil to let an appropriate amount of light in. Okay, and it's the colored part. So what is it called? Iris. And iris is number 3 on your diagram. So please pause this now, and you'll see how on the side view, it really does look like, it kind of looks like a little stick of gum here, but you'll see that it's like a little muscle. It looks, it's pink in this diagram. It's not in your paper. But yeah, you'll see it's kind of like a little muscle. And so you can see, oh, I can understand how it can shrink and change size. So that's what the iris does. So please write that down now. So why did I say quote unquote hole in your eye? Okay. Is the pupil really a hole in my eye? So if it's raining and I look up, will water fall into that hole? No, it won't. Okay. So yes, it is technically a hole. Technically it is. However, that hole into your eye is protected. Think of it's protected by a shield. Okay. An invisible thin layer shield. It's got to be an invisible one, because if it wasn't invisible, light wouldn't be able to get in there, right? So the thin, clear layer that protects your eyeball from damage is called the cornea. Say it with me. Cornea. Cornea, right? So it's cornea. That is what protects your eye. Okay, and thank goodness it's there, because if the cornea wasn't there, you're right. If water got into your eye, it would literally fall into the hole. It would fall into the pupil, and you don't want that. You don't want water inside your eyeball. That would be a very bad situation, right? So the cornea protects that, okay? And cornea is number 1. I told you we're going in the opposite order, but I really wanted to introduce the pupil first. Like, Mr. Brown, well, how come you didn't start with the cornea? I didn't want to do that. I wanted to start with, it just made more sense to go in the order that I did, okay? So number 1 on your paper, please pause the video, is the cornea, and it's the outside layer of that. So you'll see in this diagram, it's right there. It looks like a little, it's blue on my picture, but it's actually quite invisible, okay? So here's the thing about the cornea. You can scratch it. You can damage it. It is a shield, but just like if you brought a shield into battle and someone hits your shield, it could get scratched, right? A shield can get damaged in battle. It's not going to stay in perfect shape, right? Even Captain America's shield got broken. So you need to take care of your eyes. Okay, Mr. Brown wears contacts, and I will confess, I'm not a good boy when it comes to take care of my contacts, and I have gotten what was called corneal abrasions, which means scratches on my cornea. Okay, scratches on that invisible shield, and it's not good. You have to take eye drops and medicine for it, and it takes time to heal, and it hurts. It feels like you've got a piece of dirt in your eye, even though you don't. So please take care of your eyes. They're the only ones you've got. And so, yeah, you got to be careful with that, right? So even though it's a shield, it's not like a impenetrable shield. It's not a shield that can never ever know. Your cornea can get damage. So when I say here's a sneak peek of tomorrow's lesson, I mean the next video, because it's not going to be tomorrow. It's actually going to be the next one you're going to watch. So there are other parts of the eye. Some of these right here, like the macula and the vitreous. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to actually talk about that, because you got to stop somewhere, right? But we will take care of the other 4 parts of that diagram of the eye. We're going to fill those in on the next video, but I think this is a pretty good place to start, right? And so let's review, shall we? Okay, the pupil is the little black hole in your eye. It is what lets light in for images to actually form in the back of your eye. Spoiler alert, they form in the back of your eye, spoiler. And so if it wasn't for the pupil, the light wouldn't be able to get in. Now, what changes the shape, because remember, the pupil changes shape depending on how light or dark it is the iris. And that's the colored part of your eye. Think of it like a little muscle that expands and contracts to make your pupil larger or smaller. And the pupil, even though it is technically a hole in your eye, it's protected by a clear, thin layer called the cornea. It's like the shield. Okay, so that's part 1 of parts of the eye, and it's only going to get better. So please make sure that you hold on to that paper, because you're going to need it for part 2. All right, see you soon, folks.